I'm pretty sure you've heard about Nintendo before, right? And also you know some of its games like Mario or Legends of Zelda or Smash Bros. Any of those games they were invented by Nintendo. And as many people don't know, Nintendo isn't a new company. No, it's actually one of the oldest gaming companies of all time. They were created in 1889, and that is what I'm here to talk about today. I will show you guys the history of Nintendo. First, going through how did it start, and then moving to what games and consoles has Nintendo ever produced, and I'm conclude with why does Nintendo is still so big even after so many years. So let's first take a look on how the Nintendo company starts. Nintendo, as I mentioned before, Nintendo was created by a, a young Japanese guy called Fusajiro Yamushi in 1889. So basically, Nintendo has about 131 years right is 131 years right now. Uh, and Nintendo, as many people don't know, also Nintendo did start as a gaming company, but it wasn't a electronic gaming company. They started making a card game called Hanafuda. And it was um, a very popular card game at that time. Nintendo first created Nintendo's first console just came in 1977, basically 80 about 90 years after Fusajiro Yamushi created the company, and also Fusajiro was dead at that time. Yeah, so basically 1997, 1977, they created their first console called uh, Color TV Game 6. Here's a picture of Fusajiro Yamushi. Here's a picture of the game that he created, the Hanafuda. And here's a picture of the console that Nintendo ever, the first console that Nintendo made, the Color TV Game 6. What games has Nintendo ever produced? If you count all the games that Nintendo has ever made, you're gonna find something around 200 different games. Yes, they made a lot of games. Also, Nintendo made 18 different consoles. The consoles that Nintendo made were like the consoles that Nintendo made that were like the most popular ones are like Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, also the Wii, and the most new one that they've made is the Nintendo Switch. The game that Nintendo first created was Donkey Kong. It was like the classic Donkey Kong, the one that it had a gorilla grabbing some berries, throwing them at you, and you basically were trying to dodge those barriers, climbing the stairs, and you had to save the princess. That was the game basically, and that was the first game that Nintendo has ever made. And but like after it, Nintendo made a lot of different games. Like any game from Mario or Legends of Zelda or Metroid, Nintendo made all of those games. Also, you might know Pokemon. I'm pretty sure you know it, but at that time, Pokemon was a popular thing just in Japan. Nintendo was basically the company that brought yeah. Nintendo was basically the company that brought Pokemon to the rest of the world. So Pokemon started becoming a really popular thing in the entire world because of Nintendo. They made the first game from Pokemon. Here's a picture of the Super Nintendo. Um, my parents used to play a lot on the Super Nintendo. They had a Super Nintendo, and and yeah, like it was just like a very popular console at that time. Here's a picture of the Donkey Kong. Here's the gorilla. He's basically grabbing some berries. Here's you. This might be Mario. And here's the princess. You have to climb those stairs while you dodge the barriers that he's throwing at you, and you have to save the princess. Here's the Super Mario World, and I think this is like the most popular game that Nintendo has ever produced. It's just like uh, Mario is one of the any Mario game is like a very popular game, but Super Mario World I think is like the most popular one. It's just like many people still playing it today, and also I still playing it today. And here's a picture of the console that uh, the last console that Nintendo made, the Nintendo Switch. And why does Nintendo still so big even after so many years? If you look it up, you find many different gaming companies that went bankrupt because of poor choices. And I think the biggest example of it is Sega. Sega, the creator of Sonic, and you might be thinking, well, the creator of Sonic went bankrupt. Yes, and Sonic was like just as popular as Mario at that time, and they went bankrupt mostly because of poor choices. They just couldn't find out what their public was looking for. They made one game that was a very successful game that is Sonic, and then they basically stopped. Yeah, that was it. Other gaming companies that went bankrupt as well are Atari as flagship studios, 3DO, and there are so many other gaming companies that went bankrupt. And Nintendo is very different. Like they are in this area, the gaming area, since 1889. That is about 131 years. Actually, that is 131 years, and they've like they've been like, the biggest gaming company since I guess 1980, since the 80s, they've been the biggest gaming company. And even when Sony created the first PlayStation, Nintendo was like way bigger than Sony at that time. So PlayStation it was a very successful thing from Sony, but it wasn't as successful as the Super Nintendo or the Nintendo 64 or all the games that Nintendo made. Also, Nintendo understood that they couldn't compete against Microsoft or Sony, because because Microsoft that made Xbox One and Sony that made the PlayStation, they basically are trying to make consoles that are like the has really good graphics, and you can play any game on it. Doesn't matter like the game quality. The game can be a really heavy game, like and you can still play on it. Microsoft and Sony, they're focusing on making like the best console ever, and Nintendo understood that they couldn't compete against them, and they just started uh, making consoles that the people making consoles and games that people were interested in playing. They uh, they basically um, they they basically started creating games that were fun for people to play, that people could like play it anywhere, and also play just for fun. They didn't have to be competitive. They didn't have to really spend time on that game to improve their mechanics or anything like that. No, it was just a for fun a game that you play for fun, and that is why they made a lot of they made a lot of success with it, and also because that is why they still really big even after so many years. So today I showed you guys the history of Nintendo, and I showed you guys how did it start, what games has Nintendo ever produced, and what consoles as well. And I told you guys what is it still so big even after so many years. And now you know that video games are anything from like today's world or even from the past decade. No, it's a really old thing. As you know, the first console that Nintendo made was made in 1977. So basically, your parents played a lot of video games too. And now, if they tell you that you're playing too much video games, you can tell them that, oh, I'm just playing too much video games because you played a lot of them as well when you're young, and if you hadn't played them, then basically I wouldn't be playing them so much right now. it isn't a thing from today. Uh, so that was the history of Nintendo, and thank you.